Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Lemia.
And my name is Adel.
And we are the co-founders of Next Podcast Media. We are so excited to have you join us for our 4th edition of The Power of Podcast, and for the very first time coming to you virtually.
That's right. After 3 amazing events in Dubai and 1 in Riyadh, we decided it was time to bring the magic of podcasting straight to your screen. No flight, no parking, no excuses. We even brought your lunch to your desk. And if you didn't receive anything, don't worry, we'll have the opportunity to host you at our networking event later today.
Exactly. And whether you're tuning in from your office, your living room, or from a coffee shop, we are so glad that you're here. Today is all about diving into what makes podcasting such a powerful tool for brands, creators, and marketers alike.
We'll take you behind the scene of what's shaping the landscape of the podcast industry. And of course, we'll hear amazing voices from the podcast industry and the media industry today.
But before we jump into the agenda, we want to quickly introduce you to the team behind Next Podcast Media and behind this event.
Hi everybody, it's great to introduce myself. My name is Susie. If you haven't met me before, I am the Director of Copy, Content, Marketing Strategy for Next Broadcast Media, and I'm joining you today from my home, which is Toronto, Canada. And I'm really excited about today's event because it supports exactly the mission that I do every day, which is to demystify podcast advertising, help brands and agencies understand the power of it and what it can do when it's implemented correctly. And so each talk today is going to add so much value to you. I'm going to learn, you're going to learn. It's going to be a great day.
Hi, my name is Aliki Delaveri. I lead on all host-read sponsorships at Next Broadcast Media. I manage both our regional and our global campaigns.
Hi, I'm Claudius Boller, Chief Business Officer at Next Broadcast Media. And I look after strategy as well as global partnerships. And I'm super excited that we doubled our growth last year thanks to all of you. And so we're going to do the same this year and even more next year.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Samaha. I've been in Dubai for 23 years and counting. It's the best place to be. It's where I believe the podcast journey for the region have been launched and kickstarted. I work in a variety of businesses when it comes to social media, fintech, ad tech, e-commerce, personal and corporate branding, and I'm a recent author. And what brings me to this journey today is, first, I believe in the concept of journalism and content. And when you have seen what's been happening around us for the past few years, especially post-corona and with the rise of social media, podcast has become one of the most sought-after content to people with power. And what do I mean to people with power? I mean people who have influence, who make difference, and who always strive to learn. That doesn't mean that podcast is only about learning and growing. It's also entertaining. And you find a lot of content that around there where people can switch off, find something new, have a smile, be a bit dramatic, learn some history, and so forth. And that's what brings me to Next Broadcast Media, where I believe we have a great opportunity for the advertisers to create a new wave of advertising into people's ears, where brands connect the fastest way to their minds, to the consumer minds, and that's what the power of podcast advertising will give you. Through our supply and through new advertisers, through the demand, through the ad manager, through the tech that we have created, we will create smarter, better, close to people's minds and hearts advertising. Welcome to Next Broadcast Media.
Hello everyone, I'm Asma and I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. I handle client partnerships at Next Broadcast Media, where I help brands and agencies build impactful audio ad strategies by connecting them with the right podcasts. Podcast listeners are some of the most engaged audiences out there, and I essentially help advertisers tap into that with creative campaigns. I'm excited for today and looking forward to the conversations ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Akash Keswani. I'm the CFO at Next Broadcast Media. Absolutely excited to join all of you in our online Power of Podcast today. I look after the finances at Next Broadcast Media. Really excited to see our growth trajectory over the past 5 years and looking forward to another 50 years. Thank you.
Now that you've met the team, let's take a look at what's in store for today's event. We've created a dynamic mix of insights, creativity, and real-world success stories that reflect just how powerful podcasting has become as a medium. Here's a quick look at today's agenda. First, we're going to give you a quick introduction, which is an interview about Next Podcast Media, that is then followed by a panel discussion about how brands are embedding themselves into podcasts. We then have another panel discussion, which is called Beyond Impressions, Creating a Podcast. Then we have some of our international partners talking about international podcast advertising and why they belong into every media plan. So get comfy, turn up the volume, and let's explore the power of podcasts together.
Hi Lamia.
Hello.
Hi Adil.
Hi, Ibrahim.
How's your day going?
Very well,
Good.
good, yeah.
Very good.
Very busy.
Well, for those watching and listening who don't know me, I'm Ibrahim Jabri. Let's start with the intros, I suppose. A little bit of background about me. I've worked with agencies for almost 14 years now, and I've recently moved to tech. I'm a big passionate about podcast and podcast advertising, of course. And I have my own podcast. So podcast advertising is a big area for me. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about that with you guys. Do you quickly want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, my name is Lamia from Next Broadcast Media. I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm looking mainly after the commercial part of the business.
Very good.
And my name is Adel. I'm the co-founder of Next Podcast Media. I'm literally on the supply side and on the tech side, on the demand side. I'm literally on every side of the project. So
Excellent. So let's get straight into it. 3 years ago, you launched the power of podcasts. What made you start it, and how has the landscape changed since then?
So we attend a lot of events abroad because most of them are happening in the US or in Europe or in Germany. And pretty much all the events are around podcasters. So you have podcasters coming to talk to other podcasters or tech solution talking to. And everybody is complaining about the fact that there is no demand in the room. So what we decided to do 3 years ago is to produce content for media buyers.
Yeah. Also adding to that, what you already explained very well is, so we started 5 years ago, and we managed to become one of the largest marketplaces outside of the US. And basically we're the only player here in the region who has the biggest marketplace of podcasts and audio publishers. And we wanted to bring the expertise, and basically we wanted to be on the forefront of the education, of educating the media buyers, and connecting both sides, the demand and the supply. Mm-hmm. And just help the region to get to know more about the podcast industry, about podcast advertising in general.
Right. I really like the online version of this event, like making it online, so that for those out there that are good at multitasking, perhaps they can reply to an email while they're listening to this.
There is also one cool thing we added is there is a live chat, so you can talk to the team. Usually you just listen, but if you have questions, you have to wait or take notes. You might forget. Here you can literally interact with all of us. And you can reach out to the team on the chat on the right side of the screen. And we try to make it easier to consume, but you can also talk to us during the presentations.
And what would you say is the biggest misconception about podcast advertising that still lingers today? Today we know that the perception of podcast advertising is changing. Mm-hmm. But what is it that is still lingering today from a misconception perspective?
The biggest misconception about a podcast, I would say, is that a lot of people still think it's very small. But it's actually massive. And if we look at the numbers of the number of people, especially here in the region, who listen to podcasts on a regular basis, we have more than 60% of the population, online population, who tune in on a daily basis. And so it's massive. It's becoming mainstream. Mm-hmm. And I would say even it's kind of replacing the radio. Yeah. It's becoming the new radio, because if I ask you if you have a radio at home, do you have a radio at home?
No.
Yeah, yeah, and I believe, yeah, and in the last 5 years, I've asked pretty much every new
Thousands of
potential client if they have a radio, and only one person answered yes, and then he added that it's actually for decoration purposes.
Yeah.
So people don't really listen anymore to the radio, but they listen to podcasts, and it kind of reminds me of I think it was around 2014 when. People stopped watching offline TV and they moved towards online TV, and YouTube
Right.
became big. And pretty much it's the same happening now. No one really listens
Yeah.
anymore to the radio, but people listen to digital content and
Yeah.
podcasts specifically.
Yeah, so people are listening less to the radio, but music and audio content is still an essential part of their lives, and therefore, podcast has taken its place and is replacing a radio or digital streaming platforms. And I just wanted to circle back on the niche misconception about podcast and the numbers. And you are saying that the numbers are great. I wanted to know, or maybe perhaps guide our listeners and viewers on what tools they can use to measure the penetration of podcasts. Do you think that they'll find it on platforms like GWI? Do you think that they can use IAB perhaps to understand the size of the opportunity of podcasts?
Yeah.
So there is many tools.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do on our end is to literally create tools for agencies and clients to be able to track the charts in each country by categories, but also check each podcast and see how many listeners they have. And what we noticed with the agencies and clients, who got access to those tools, is they get really surprised with the size of the audience. But then we also show what similar brands are doing in the US. And we have access to numbers, and we can see how much an American Express spends. American Express spent $36 million last year on podcast only in the US, and it's not the biggest spender. When we sit with agencies, they can't believe those numbers. This can't be true, but this is the case. Those things are completely transparent. It's online. The moment you publish something on podcast, it's public. And any platform can see how many impressions you bought on what podcast you're running. So we're trying to make the industry as transparent as possible, whatever it is with the supply, but also with the other advertisers spending on podcast.
Gotcha. And I want to go back to you and talk a little bit about attention span, because you did mention that people are getting tired from screens and maybe they're finding podcasts a little bit more comfortable. And we hear a lot about attention span shrinking, but podcast listening is growing. So why do you think that is?
So if you think about if someone listens to a podcast, they decide that they want to listen to that content. And then it's not like on social media, like a quick story that you watch, but it's content that is usually 15, 20, 40 minutes, sometimes even 2 hours. If you look at Diary for CEO, I think he has a couple of episodes that are more than 2 hours. So people come on their own to listen to that content, and they want to listen to that content. So this is one of the reasons why the attention is way, way higher. The engagement is higher. The level of concentration is way, way higher. There's also studies that confirm that the level of concentration when listening to a podcast is very similar to listening to the news or watching the news.
Yeah.
So it's way, way higher than social media or video as well. And then in terms of advertising, when I play an ad on a podcast, usually you just have one ad, maybe 2, or maximum 3. So for a brand, the share of voice is way, way higher. If I turn on the radio, I mean, I don't really listen to the radio, but I remember when turning on the radio, you usually have like 6, 7, 8 ads within an ad break. Users are bombarded with ads, so they don't remember. Yeah. But when people listen to a podcast and they hear an ad, it's usually just one ad and people remember it. Right. And additionally, one more thing I want to add to that, if I play an ad on a podcast, it's a 30-second ad, a message of 30 seconds, usually between 60 and 70 words. And this is one impression for an advertiser. If you compare an impression on for display, which is according to IAB, 50% for a second, this is one impression, then the impression for audio, for podcast is way, way, way more valuable.
Okay. And I do agree on the intention. I do feel that people who go to watch a podcast are much more intentional about what content they want to listen to. And there is more focus and concentration. How do you see podcasts fitting into a media plan today? Are they replacing something, or are they playing a different role? Are they complementing other channels?
It's something you complement. It's a part of a 360 strategy. It's where you can reach an audience that you can no longer reach on TV, that you can no longer reach sometimes with display because of ad blockers. And it's an audience that also has premium subscription. They're going to watch Netflix, they don't have ads. And it's a place where you can reach them. And we reach a point where it should technically be almost on any media plan, because before we're mainly using it for upper funnel, but we still upper funnel. But now you can use it for lower funnel. And if you take the biggest spender in the US today, if you take the top 50, I would say 80% of them are using it for lower funnel.
Interesting.
Yeah, it has to be part of any media plan. People, they spend a third of their time, of their media time with audio. And a big part of that is on podcasts. And if a brand wants to reach an audience, they simply have to be on audio and on podcast as well.
I can also add something else regarding the lower funnel.
Yeah.
We have to use the right tool for tracking. If we use the wrong tool, it's simply not going to work, and you won't be able to see that it has an impact on your campaign. And most of discussions we have had since we started pushing the lower funnel is the source of truth. Advertisers and agencies who use it for display and video want to use CM360, which is great. It's the best solution for display and video and social media. But audio is a just different ecosystem, and this is at the moment it's still not possible to use CM360 for audio, and there is other tools. And those tools gives you the possibility to associate a listen with someone landing on your page or on your app. And but very often we see agencies telling us, but if I can't see it in CM360, and you're simply gonna exclude something that works. Like we had a couple of campaigns lately where for one of the biggest food delivery app, we had the cost per download at $2. So audio is competing at the same level as display and video. And for another product, we're very surprised to have a cost per a CPA at $2 for audio, with CPM literally 5 times higher than display. And but if you don't use the right tool to track it, you'll never be able to see it, and you're just going to exclude something that worked.
Yeah. I just want to add 2 points on this question. The first one is on whether it should be added to a plan or not. Audio is just a totally different touch point, right? It's a touch on by itself, right? And it's an opportunity for brands to take advantage of this touch point, of the time and moment when a user is listening to a podcast, to be there, right? And the thing about audio is people are loyal usually to one app, right? They use this app over and over again, which means that whenever you are present on audio, you're achieving an increment or an incremental reach, right, for your campaigns. So it is very beneficial to have audio, to have podcast on your plan, right? If you're trying to increase your awareness or increase your reach. And on the measurement aspect, yes, CM360 today may not be tracking, measuring, I guess, audio, but there are ways to prove that audio could work for any metric. And one example is MMM studies, right? You could very well use an MMM study to prove the incrementality of audio across any metric: awareness, consideration, sales, downloads. and see the value it brings to you in your mix. So I wonder if this is something that maybe perhaps more mature markets are utilizing to prove the value of audio.
This market has been using it since 2020. It's something we introduced immediately when we started pushing audio. From the beginning, we needed to have tools to prove that it works, and it needed to be independent from a third party. And we brought a new startup back in the days. Shout out to Happydemics, who were very supportive since 2020, and now they are being used by many brands here in the region, not just for audio, also for other channel, to be able to have a third party, completely independent, to tell you if it works or not.
Yeah.
They have their own methodology. And for audio, it works pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
Over the last 5 years, we see an uplift of around 25% for pretty much every metrics. And for us, it's something which makes sense. It's 70 words in your airport. You don't really skip them. You have a completion rate of 97%. So if we ask you after a week, after a day, if you heard the ad, it plays 3 times, you would remember it.
Yeah. So BLS studies is
Yes.
something that you should absolutely leverage when you run a campaign. What's changed today in terms of creative and format, especially that podcast videos are on the rise?
Yeah. I would say the most common format that is being used is the dynamic ad, usually via programmatic. So it's a dynamic ad insertion. You have a 30-second ad spot that can play as a pre-roll, mid-roll, or post-roll. I would say this is the most common one. You have the possibility to work with the host of a podcast, and they talk about a product or a solution. Usually between 60 and 90 seconds. It sounds more authentic naturally because it's the same voice as the content. But then we also have the possibility to produce content for a brand, either from scratch, but then they should keep in mind it's something new. You won't have any listeners from day one. So there's also a lot of promotion that needs to be done. It's a long-term strategy that a brand has to have when they decide to produce content. Or they have the possibility to work with an existing podcaster who already has a listener base, and they can produce content that is relevant for a brand. But brands should keep in mind it should be still relevant to the podcast and the host and what they stand for.
Cool.
So there is also AI, which is completely changing the game in audio. It takes just a couple of seconds to get an audio ad now, something that sounds exactly like a radio ad. And then you can edit it also in a couple of seconds. So you will be saving weeks of back and forth email. It's something free with most of at least with us, it's something free. And we have a self-service platform where agencies and advertisers can literally play around and create their ads from a prompt, produce an audio ad for XYZ, have this done, select any language, any accent, any music. So it gives the possibility to advertisers to try audio, because very often, many advertisers don't do audio because they don't have assets, so they skip it. Instead of involving the creative agency, a copywriter, a voiceover, editing, all that is gone. You can launch something in a couple of minutes. And the last one is the audio DCO. It's a huge game changer because instead of being limited to one ad, you can have 100,000 combinations possible, and you can play on the price, you can play on the weather, you can time of the day of the week, the destination, the closest airport, and we produce many things like that, and it shows that it does work pretty well.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting for multi-market brands.
Definitely,
Right?
yeah. So we're running a lot of global campaigns where we promote different destinations, or we have different ads depending on the departure airport, where we play with the location, with the time of the day, with the weekend, weekday. So there's a lot of things we are already doing, and a lot of things that still can be done. So, and the obstacle of having an audio ad shouldn't be an obstacle anymore. We can literally produce something in 20 seconds, and any language, any accent, for any brand.
Right.
Just add one thing too.
Yeah.
Let's imagine you Etihad, you run global campaign. You will need to produce ads in each country where you are. You could technically produce an audio DCO ads in 20, 50 different languages if you want, with the right accent for each country, and be able to know what is the closest airport. Know also what are the destinations from that airport, know the weather in that location, and know the weather in the other location, and also know the time of the day and day of the week to play with people's mood. If you're in Manchester, 9 o'clock on Monday, on the way to work, and it's raining, we know that your mood is not at the top. I can mention one of the destinations available through from the closest airport.
Nice. That sounds like every single airline should get on board with this.
But you can also, one more thing,
Definitely.
you can also record your ad on the 1st of January and use it for the whole year, and have the ad changing automatically for Christmas, Easter, Eid, Ramadan, and have the things changing all the time, non-stop, without having to do anything. So it's a huge save of time and money as well.
Yeah.
The last question is, what can people expect from today's event?
Yeah.
And what's the one thing you hope they take away?
So from today's event, people can expect a lot of insights from people from the industry who have been in the podcast industry for a couple of years. We have good panel discussions with brands and agency leads who have been running campaigns, though they will share their expertise and their insights. And which should just give people here that are watching all the media strategy, all the strategies and insights, and to get started as well. For those who haven't tested it yet, and for those who already tapped into podcasts, give them more confidence to have it as an always-on approach. Of course, we hope that everyone is enjoying the event and the discussions with the insights from all the people that we have on today's event.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks
Yeah.
for having us. Let's continue with our first panel discussion: how brands are embedding themselves into podcast. This session explores how brands are moving beyond traditional advertising and truly becoming part of the conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Lemia from Next Podcast Media, and I'm really excited to be hosting today's panel discussion, how brands are embedding themselves into podcasts. Here's the thing. Podcasting is not just about being heard, it's about being felt. And in today's session, we're going to explore with some of the leading brands how they are integrating within podcasts. I'm really excited to be joined by three panelists, by three experts from the industry. I have here Nitika Bandari. She's the head of programmatic at Dentsu. We have Patricia Dixon, who's the global head of programmatic at Capital.com. And we have Yasmin Al-Turk, who is the digital supply lead at Group M Media. Let's dive in, and thank you so much for joining. I'm going to start with you, Patricia. I'm curious to understand, why did Capital.com choose to invest in podcasts, and what stood out about the medium for you and for the company?
Well, that's a good question. And if I was going to be very, very honest, it would be because our competitors aren't there. We are in such a niche sector. I think like 1% of people do CFD trading. So if you think about what's available, right, from programmatic, you have DV360, for example. Everyone's buying the same audiences. Everyone's buying the same supply. It is so saturated, and it's such a niche subset. So trying to stand out from that crowd is really difficult. And I think obviously, like in the UAE, we really wanted to double down on branding. And I'm a podcast listener as well. So you kind of have to start with what you know. And for us, I think entering the podcast space was an opportunity for us to speak to potential clients, customers, newbies, whoever that might be, in a way that was quite intimate and not just be yet another banner on Golf News, for example. No shade on Golf News, I love them. But so this is why we kind of chose podcasting, right? Because I think initially we started off with, sponsorships and some host-read ads. We just dipped our toes. You just don't know what you're getting yourself into until you actually start. So for us, it was really exciting, right? Because we got to start shaping our narrative and finding our tone, which is something that we hadn't necessarily done before. We'd done performance marketing, and it was like brands, like, like Trade Now or whatever. But we hadn't necessarily thought about how do people want to be want to receive us as a brand. So yeah, that's where we started.
Very interesting. And Yasmin, you're looking after a couple of brands at Group MENA. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe one of your brands or a couple of brands, why they started getting into podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good perspective, actually, thinking about that there isn't, the saturation isn't there on podcasts currently. It's still seen as something new, especially in this region, although it's been on the rise. But for me, I mean, before we recommend anything to a brand, I think about me as a user. And so obviously podcast has become part of my everyday life. We as the modern world want everything now, immediately. We want to opt in to what we want to listen to and when we want to listen to. So on my commute to work, now I listen to my favorite podcasters. On, before bed, I listen to my favorite podcasters. And I trust them. Like they have, a special place. It's like I know them. I feel like I know them. So when a brand really needs to build up that trust and that's currently not there, I think that's a perfect opportunity for them to really understand how they can leverage podcasts specifically. So we've had a few brands, I would say a lot in tourism as well, in international markets. And I know we're talking more about MENA here, but just to stand out as well, definitely that is something that stands out. But you need to be very, very specific on who and how you're targeting them as well.
Nitika, what can you share with us? You're also working with a couple of brands. What is your perspective?
Yeah, I think for us and our brands, probably the brand started because podcast was something new. They wanted to, just try the new channels as well. Especially for the international brands, it was quite popular already in the other markets. So that kind of trickled down for us as well in MENA. But I think once they did try it, it has become like a regular channel.
Like an always on.
And I think brands have now seen the value in it as well, because it's quite authentic, it's immersive, and it feels very personal as well. So for one of our brands, for example, it was to how do we reach those niche audiences and, in the environment that doesn't feel very, cluttered as well. So podcast was the perfect, I think, channel for them. And for one of our brands, it's been always on. I wouldn't say always on for a full year activity, but like every year they come back with their own podcast as well that they want to promote. So it's quite interesting.
In terms of performance, what was the thing that basically impacted the performance? Was it the creative? Was it the context? Or was it the targeting?
From my perspective, I know you asked, is there something that is the most important? And we've been in a situation where we've got the context right, we've got the targeting right, and the creative wasn't quite right. And so this was kind of with our UAE brand launch, and it was fantastic. The initial creative we had was great. It was talked about how we're here, we've got an office or whatever, but what we didn't realize until we changed the creative was that it didn't have character. It didn't have our brand personality. It didn't have tonality. It wasn't edgy. It wasn't cool, right? And as soon as we changed the creative, suddenly I have people being like, "Oh, I heard your ad. I heard your ad." And I thought, "What do you mean you heard my ad? My ad's been going for months. How have you just heard it?" But as you said, that's when they hear it, right? Because it starts to resonate with you. So I would say from my experience, it is a holy trinity, but I do think creative can be the make or break for a lot of podcast advertising, because it is extremely immersive. You don't have a visual backup to give you anything else. If someone's not engaging with your creative, if you don't grab them, you kind of miss them.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting when you said the tone of the, the message as well. Because for one of our brands as well, what they did was we had 4 iterations of a creative, but through the process, what the brand learned as well is that the tone of the message is what matters a lot as well. So there was a lot of, back and forth with the creative teams on how it can be fixed, and and I think they've kind of found that sweet spot as well, because like this, I think it has to be like conversational. It shouldn't sound like just one way talking to the listeners as well. So I mean, the context and the tone of the message, I think that matters a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add to that, because you sparked something as well? I mean, I think like testing different things. So like you said, having the 4, I was going to say the same. We had a recent campaign as well, which we ran through you guys, which included 4 different like audios. And I almost always guarantee the one that you don't think would actually be the highest performing is, and and then you do that with measurement studies as well, so you can actually really understand like what impact it had on ad recall or whatever it may be. But I think that is like so essential that we never think about. And a big thing that in this region, when someone says podcast or audio online, they're thinking like a radio ad, and it's completely different.
Yes.
I'm like, please don't give us your radio audio and expect us to run this and actually resonate with the audience that you have, and to run it across, a premium podcast. It's a completely different audience. Like, no. So that is something that we've also really, talking about creative and the importance of it. It's actually customizing it to podcasts and not just running an audio, especially something comparable to what they're doing on radio.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think we received a lot of radio ads where we were banging our heads against the wall because it simply didn't, we knew that it wouldn't work. But then we usually were able to change the creative, adapt it a little bit. I think today we also have the possibility to produce different audio samples very, very quickly with the help of AI. Things can go really, really faster, and we have the possibility to test a couple of ads. I know that you all have run programmatic campaigns, I'm curious to see if your brand or your brands or any of your brands has tested any other formats, and if yes, what format has worked really well, maybe for a specific vertical.
I can take that one actually. So before we started properly testing programmatic campaigns, we actually did a little bit from sponsorships as well as host-read ads. And shout out to Conversations with Lulu. We were, sponsoring her for quite a long time. And there's something very unique that you get when you associate yourself so deeply with a singular person or with someone's brand, right? And I think for us, when we went through that partnership, basically just gave her free reign. This is her platform. These are her people that she talks to, that come here every week to listen to her. So, we would give like little prompts being like, oh, can you maybe mention something about gold this time? Or can you mention about this or whatever that was? But it was very much like, do it in the same authenticity that you have been doing your podcast in, because that's why we want people to come to visit capital.com, for example. So that was something that was really special, actually. I'd say the difficulty with host-read ads is you don't have as much flexibility with it, and it is like, it's show specific, it's a bit of a niche one, but I think as an advertiser, you have to have multiple strategies. Like just with any other format, you can't have a singular strategy and that just be the be all and end all. You have to play around with things. So whether it's you choose a couple of different shows, you try different things out, and you'll realize that you start to reach people in very slightly different ways.
Okay, sorry.
I don't want to give an example, but the only thing I would want to say is, like with programmatic, obviously we're very pro-programmatic. Again, we don't have to include this, but it's up to you guys. But I definitely think that, always something like sponsorships and host reads and all of that, and amplifying it with programmatic is always like, there's always a missing connection sometimes. Not always, of course, there's brands like you guys who have done it, but I really wish there were more brands willing to test that, and I think that's really when you can see like how powerful a channel can be. But we don't have to include that. But.
Topic brand safety and suitability has been quite a big topic actually for other channels, and I know it is a big topic for most of the brands here locally. Can you talk about brand safety? What is the opinion of your brands that you manage regarding brand safety and podcasts? Have they been using some of the tools that are actually available? And how is that discussion going?
I think brand safety is easier to address. Brand suitability is where you really need to be able to take a step back and really put your perspective into the consumer's mindset and say, okay, we're okay with this type of content, and we're just absolutely not with this. This is not, it's not within our brand perception and whatever. And then, again, we have the technology. We use partners like you guys, and we have brand safety and suitability partners specifically for audio and podcast. And those advancements are incredible. I mean, the way that they can understand the tone and the context and the audience, the comments, like what is actually being perceived and what's the sentiment behind it. I mean, the advancement's absolutely incredible. And so we just need to make sure that we're aligned from the brand, and then we can trickle that down through the entire, ecosystem, I would say.
Maybe just to add to that, because I think there's maybe video podcasting is kind of on the rise as well, but still audio podcasting is way bigger than video. But what we have seen as a challenge is that maybe brands they think that they have to put the same restrictions on audio that they put on video. Definitely. But for example, on audio, you don't really have user-generated content like you have on YouTube. Has that been a challenge for you as well? Or is that something where you think we still need to educate clients about it?
Absolutely. I mean, we see brands who put such strict... Sorry. We have brands that put such strict guidelines and benchmarks. But then we see what they're running on their social activity, And I will never understand where's that, why is it okay on social, especially when you're talking about podcasts, it is user created. And it is, running on YouTube a lot of times, or it's a video podcast. So, really, I mean, you just can't overprotect that you're actually missing out on your audience. I never think you should be in a situation where, you're being, what's it called? What's the new term? Not banned. What's it called when you're blacklisted by not blacklisted, what's it called? Oh my God.
Cancelled.
Thank you. Cancelled. Guys, I'm getting old.
It took us all a second.
Exactly. But you should never be in a situation like that for sure. But essentially you do want it to be authentic. And so you really need to understand how we can portray our message in a very authentic way, and what means the most to us when it comes to brand safety and brand suitability.
I can just say something on that one, because God, I'm so tired of all the targeting. Obviously I've been agency side, and I've seen how nitpicky brands can be. And let's be completely honest, when things are actually being done in-house by themselves, they don't give the same standards that they do give to agencies and suppliers. That. I preach on that one. And it's 2025, this whole brand safety thing started such a long time ago, where you would have, Disney appearing next to beheaded content or something that's really brutal, really gruesome. Now, there's been, obviously the whole industry went a bit crazy and everything happened. Publishers have brand safety. SSPs have brand safety, DSPs have brand safety. It's there is layers and layers and layers and layers of targeting to protect your safety from that, right? So brand suitability, I agree with you. I feel like that is the brand's decision to decide what is suitable for me, what's not suitable for me. If you are a children's brand, of course you're going to have more suitability restrictions versus just a standard brand. But just because it's there does not mean you have to apply absolutely everything. It doesn't make sense for your brand. Let's be honest. And also, it's slightly different. We're talking about audio versus visual. We're talking about, usually you're a display ad or a video ad across content and user-generated. Very different scopes, versus what you're listening to, And we're also talking about a space that we like because it's authentic and it's vulnerable. But then it's saying you still want to put all these restrictions in. It just doesn't quite work like that. So I think if you want to enjoy the benefits of podcasting and the audio space and the authenticity of it, you have to also be a little bit more flexible to also be authentic as well.
Flexible but authentic. That's the perfect
That's the tagline.
Yeah. All right. That's what we're taking out of this. Yeah.
We're going to rename the discussion, the title. Great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insights about brand safety. I think that's a hot topic. Another hot topic is performance. I think audio and podcasting has always been seen as an awareness solution to drive KPIs for brand awareness, increase interest, and maybe consideration. But what we have actually seen, especially in the US, that performance-driven advertisers are literally increasing their spends by 10x. We have like BetterHelp, ExpressVPN, all the e-commerce brands like Shopify, who are literally in the top 10 in terms of podcast advertising. Now how is it looking in terms of performance solution or performance campaigns for the brands that when it comes to this region? We have all the tools available. What is the stage of your brands when it comes to performance for podcasting?
Okay, well, obviously I'm a performance advertiser. So it is brutal sometimes. Trying to initially get that trust, like from internal stakeholders, to tap into something that is still measurement patchy, let's be completely honest. But the thing is, performance, it can be measured in lots of different ways. You can measure it versus conversions, you can measure it versus your clicks, you can measure it on AppsFly, you can measure it versus word of mouth, you can measure it literally in any sort of way. So you have to have the right sort of KPIs for whatever you're doing. And I don't think it's kind of fair to measure, podcast advertising with the same KPIs of that really lower funnel, like, for us, you'd be driving deposits. What's going on there when your message is all around like awareness messages, So I think, yes, it can be used for a level of performance, but for that to be its primary purpose, you're kind of setting it up for failure, or you're not utilizing it properly. So from our side, what we have seen is there is some measurement, it is patchy, but there is some measurement, and what is measurable is performing really well. So it's like, but if we hadn't had gone into this space and started testing and started playing around, we would never know. So it's like, now we're here, we're like, okay, cool, maybe 10% of it is measurable, great, we're getting some performance insights of it. It can now dictate what we then do with the rest 90%. And like, look at all of us, we're advertisers, consumers, or whatever, but what do you think about when you're making a decision to buy a certain thing? You're not going to click a display ad. You're thinking about sources that are credible, sources that you recommend, such as podcasts. So you have to of course you can do measurement or performance tactics within the podcast space, but that shouldn't be your main KPI, to be completely honest. Like, add retargeting to it. If you're gonna expose users to audio ads, okay, cool, retarget them to video, push them down the funnel, get to understand who are these audiences you're actually tapping into, as opposed to saying, okay, where's my installs and where's my deposits?
You mentioned a good point when you search it, right? Yeah. So what we've seen, or what a lot of our brands tell us, is when they run campaigns, because if you think about it, if I tell you about a new restaurant that has opened in the IFC, you're gonna probably Google it, right? You're gonna search for it, and I think the same is happening with podcasting as well. So it's not gonna drive the lower conversion, but it's gonna drive people to search for it or to trigger the interest. So
and there's no one way, like you rightly said, there's no one way of measuring performance as well. Probably what can be looked at is how podcast or audio is attributing to the success of other channels as well, for example, right? And those kind of studies are what we are doing currently for the brands as well. But it's I think it's still not there for performance for our brands, but we've seen some success with how the attribution probably contributes to it, and looking at it from that perspective as well. I know attention has been, the topic as well. So how attention scores have been improving, for example, when we have the audio strategy within our different channel strategies as well. So those are the different perspectives that we are bringing in as well.
Okay.
Can I just say something? Because I love how you touch on attribution. It's like we still struggle with attribution with display ads, and then you're trying to do the same sort of measurement for podcasts. It is just really difficult. But I love what you said around how it assists other channels, right? So it's like, I think also as an industry, we do need to wise up a little bit on how we're attributing multi-format, multi-channel buys, and understanding the part of the role that it plays. Like I've seen from my side, I've seen people who've been exposed to some of the audio ads turning out to have they're better quality leads. They're doing higher deposits, but the audio was not the last touch. And if I actually looked at the attribution, how the attribution model is, it wouldn't have been associated at all. But I can I'm starting to get those insights. So this is why I said from a performance perspective, it's difficult to say this is what you're going to be measured against, because then you're going to be like apples to apples with everything else that's had a lot longer to learn and a lot more scale. But from like an assist perspective, I think it's super strong.
Yeah. What I also now heard out is that the quality of leads are better.
Yeah.
Very good to hear.
Good to hear from us as well.
Another question. So we have a lot of marketers tuned in who maybe already tapped into podcasting. I'm sure there's maybe a few brands who have never done anything yet in podcasting but are curious. What would be your piece of advice for a brand that hasn't tapped into podcast advertising yet?
I can go. Gosh. Just do it. Like, it's really not that hard. Like, just do it. The barrier to entry is low. There's so many tools. There's AI tools. There's ChatGPT. And I'm testament to this because I've written scripts on ChatGPT, tweaked it or whatever, made it sound a little bit more like the brand, use AI tools to generate the voiceovers, overlaid audio. Like, you can literally get an ad without having to pay for anything. So I don't really understand when some brands are like, oh, well, we don't have the right. It's like, you're waiting for the right something, you're going to miss the opportunity. It's like, sometimes just do it and see what happens first. Start learning, and you don't need like this high value production, as you said, utilizing radio ads. Like, I've been recording some ads for capital.com. You guys hear my voice. But it's purely because we're an industry that we react to the markets really quickly. Like, if gold jumps or Bitcoin or Trump says something crazy, like, the markets go crazy, and we need to be able to switch up our creatives quickly and react. So it's like, we've been doing stuff in-house just to kind of speed that up. It costs nothing, so it's like, play around with it. And Lemmy, you mentioned before around this viewability for display versus CPMs or whatever. It's a completely different field, right? So it's like, you're getting someone who's fully engaged for that 30 seconds. So like, use it.
Yeah, thank you. We can maybe mention our AI tool.
I knew you were making that face, being like, we have a new AI tool.
Which I also have been using.
You can go and check the voice. And
yeah, I mean, you can mention.
I'll mention it because we have also been using your AI tool. And then probably, I don't know if you've seen or heard any of the ads, but we've been using it to kind of break into some different markets where we didn't necessarily have the know-how or the production power, whatever. So, I think for us, it's been something that's been really, really important. And it's now become a bit of like an integral part when it comes to like playing around with script to see how does it flow, how does it work. So it's, I think, as an advertiser, we're very lucky today versus 5 years ago maybe, where there are so many things available for you for free to actually utilize if you can be bothered. And I think if you do, then, you know, like, you, rather than waiting for things to come and go, like, you know, I think someone said like podcast is meant to like double the amount of ad spend on like up until like 2030, which is crazy. So it's like, are you going to keep waiting for that to come and go, or are you going to try and at least have some level of first mover advantage?
I mean, you literally said that, and I think one of the first answers, right, is that, you know, that's why you got into podcasts, is because it's currently not saturated. And I actually think, you know, when you go into podcast advertising, creativity is so important. And, you know, luckily there's so many tools, including Next Broadcast, the AI tool, to be able to, you know, change creatives on the go, very quick, within seconds, essentially, and re-upload them and go. So flexibility in that sense. I mean, keeping it very authentic. This is, you know, I think I touched a point about it earlier, but really trying to keep the podcaster's authenticity is so essential. And testing across multiple, I know we said testing across creative, but also testing across multiple podcasters. I see so many brands that want to just go with the ones that have the biggest followers, the influencers or the celebrities, I'd say. But then they leave out the macro, you know, followers, podcasters as well. And you're actually really missing out on maybe a more engaged audience. You don't know unless you actually test it. You know, so going in and saying, I only want to run on 1, 2, and 3 because they have the biggest following, that's not necessarily going to translate on your campaign. So, you know, test multiple podcasters. There's no reason to be running with only very specific ones who you feel are actually the most relevant. Run the campaign and then see.
Yeah, thank you. Nitika, what advice would you give any brand that hasn't tapped into podcasting yet?
I think I would say think of long term as well, because what podcast marketing brings is the brand loyalty as well from the customers. And if you want to reach new customers or new listeners, podcasts ads remain, so it is long term as well, and if you want to gain new customers as well, then podcast is the way to go.
It's a new channel that brings additional incremental users. Okay. Thank you so much, ladies, for this conversation. I think it was very interesting and very insightful, and thank you so much to the audience, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
What a great panel discussion. Thanks to our speakers for the amazing insight. It is clear podcasting is more than just media. It is a powerful connection tool.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm really excited to be joined by these brilliant group of creators today. We're going to explore their journeys, ideas, and what goes on behind the mic. So with us today, we first have Nadeem Ibrahim, who is a industry tech thought leader, has 18 years experience in media, and founder and host of Brew Bites podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So we have Ksenia, who's an experienced marketer in the industry, and she is the co-host of This Wasn't in the Manual. Joining her is her co-host Anam, who's an associate business director at a leading media agency. And finally, we have Sarah, who's a marketer in a prop tech space and the host of She Builds. How would you guys sort of gauge success? Because I think that's very individual to each person. You know, some people might look at it as listenership. Other people might just, you know, I guess even just creating a podcast in itself is a huge feat. So
I can still go on that one. I mean, we haven't launched yet, so we can't talk about numbers. So I think we even had this discussion. For us, at a starting point, what's really important is our guests feel like their story was heard. And I think for us, the measuring success was we shot our first episode, and the host loved our questions. She loved that we researched her journey and where she's at and asked the right questions, and that's the feedback we got. And I think at this point, the success is knowing we asked the right questions and made sure that the host felt comfortable. Sorry, the guest. I'm saying host. The guest felt comfortable.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm interested to know, have any of you guys had any reservations about starting your own podcast, and what made you bite the bullet and just do it?
I have a feeling that Anam and I had the most number of reservations.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you continue.
Do you want me to name all of them?
Maybe the key ones. So I had been discussing with Adil, my friend, for a year about starting a podcast, and I was just like dabbling in and out, and it's been since last year. And the funny thing is, I posted an Instagram post on my birthday saying that this time next year I will have a podcast, and along with some a vision board. I almost gave up on the idea because I was like anybody else in self-doubt, as much as my friend was pushing me to do it, to just go for it, because I've also done a few public talks and been on panels and stuff. Senya and I have had multiple conversations about doing things together. I mean, we've been in the same field, and then Senya came along and we had this discussion, and she's like, let's do it. And I'm like, you know what, that feels easy. And now at this point, when we started off, I feel like if I have a dip, Senya comes along and she pushes me, and if she has a dip, I'm able to push her towards it as well. So we balance that out. So reservations, yes, in short, but yeah. But now we're here.
Yeah. So I was going to ask a quick question. What's your biggest frustration? When you were starting up, was there a sense of frustration that you had?
Yeah, it's just I think it's standard, the judgment of what if I am not good enough, or what if I'm not saying something important, because it's so important for me. Because when you were talking about success measuring as well, it's nice to say we're looking at ensuring there's quality content, so that's our first focus right now. But it's hard not to get swept away with the numbers and how much engagement you're getting once you start into it. I imagine that will happen, but that was primarily it. What if people why another person with a podcast kind of
I mean, I still feel like that.
Yeah, I feel
it could all go pear-shaped, right?
You never get over it, right? You, even when you're posting on LinkedIn socials about your achievements, it was so hard for me to start doing that years ago. But I feel that's a good example actually, that you still feel like that. Is me still posting on LinkedIn feels a bit cringe, to be honest. I feel why am I doing this? But I suppose it's the same with anything you do when you put out there.
I think you kind of have to I always think it's good to have a longer term broader view on what you're doing, because sometimes doing the smallest thing a post on LinkedIn can feel really inorganic.
Yeah.
But I think if you just have at the back of your mind okay, what am I actually trying to get out of this?
Yeah.
That helps. I think for me doing the podcast, success to start with for me was not about numbers. You don't have numbers to start with.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't. And if I'm honest with you, my biggest challenge is trying to do it while working an incredibly intense job. I sit on a board of a charity as well, trying to do think you can do everything. You can't do everything very well. But I think there was two aha moments for me where I was I just need to bite the bullet and do it. Was the first that my friend Joel, he had a podcast. He's got a podcast. I was his second guest, and he rolled it out so quickly. He has a team, but he rolled it out really quickly. And I met him, and he was done is better than perfect. He said, just start. Whatever you do, just start, do it, and just figure it out as you go. And the second one is I actually went to a podcast workshop with Next Broadcast, actually. And it was the, owner of Podster running the workshop. And the thing for me that made me realise why I hadn't started it yet is because I think it's incredibly daunting to say I'm going to start a podcast. Because when does it end? And do you fail if you stop? So for me, when I was talking to him, he said, do a season.
So you all come from media background. Have there been any surprises or anything that took you back when you've actually been on the other end creating the content?
Yeah, you guys are at your early stages. Let's get a fresh view.
Okay, I can start first. I worked at agency. That's why I used to advertise a lot on the podcast, because for my brand and whatnot. And of course, I knew that it took a lot of effort and work to create the podcast, to create the episodes and whatnot. But I didn't expect that it would take that much time, to be honest. And especially, I guess, the script and the whole idea took a lot of time for me, because I was really thinking who would listen to this podcast? Who is my target audience? Why do they need to listen to this? And it took me like really several months to come up with an idea of what I'm doing and who is my target audience.
Yeah, I think as well, like gone are the days where a podcast, you'd maybe just do audio only. You can do audio only podcasts, but the creator economy has shifted so much, and the bar of quality has got so much higher. Therefore, like production level of podcasts, the expectations have raised with that. And with platforms like LinkedIn moving to video first content, like if you want to make it work, you have to deliver on all those things. And that just takes time. Like for me, the surprise was genuinely the effort it took to just get from like A to Z. There's so many steps, so many micro steps. It's an element of like figuring out along the way, but it's also just the sheer just tedious tasks that come with it. And I think it's so easy to see like a final fully polished something on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and you can see really what it actually takes behind the scenes. Like I know this is not the right comparison, but like Mr. Beast, how many employees does he have to do one YouTube video?
Exactly.
You know, like it is an incredibly like labor intensive thing. You have to love it to want to do it. But I think from like the media side from before, I just did not have that level of appreciation for like what it actually takes to do something of high quality content production and distribute it in the right way, because at the end of the day, distribution is key now.
I think so. I think from my perspective, you know, maybe I've been a nemesis to some of the media suppliers out there who have got some great lineup of content, right? Having been on the side now and the amount of effort that goes into it, whether you're one of the biggest podcasters or just starting up or halfway there, wherever you are, I think we can all empathize to show that there's a lot of passion that comes from the host side of what they actually want. And the whole purpose behind it is I want to create a community, and my community will be very different from your communities, but we're building communities that are very much in tune with the type of content that you're building. So now I have much more empathy from the podcast side of stuff, in the sense of if I was to go back to an agency conversation and say you should be on a podcast or be present around a podcast, absolutely, because the ears that you get and even the eyes from an engagement perspective, you know, it's in its own ecosystem that's bubbling away. And I think we forget about that as media strategists, you know, or whatever a job function you perform on that side. But we tend to forget about that. And it's one of the, to be honest, it's one of the biggest growing spaces of media outside of gaming. And we often don't think about that. So why be on radio where you can also support it and supplement it to incremental reach on podcasting? And I think I sort of had quite an opposite view of actually it's just more of a tail end opportunity, but it's not. And like you said, actually, podcast production these days is on another level because of video that supports it. And you kind of, I think, get so fixated to think, I want mine to look like that. I want mine to look like maybe Stephen Bartlett, so I want mine to look like XYZ. But we can't. You know, like you said, they're in their own league. They've probably got 10, 15. They have a team behind them that are doing it day in, day out. No wonder they can drop an episode every day. Like, how do they function? Do they have a life? But they do multiple things. So, like, the video aspect is what keeps it interesting for me. Whether or not, and it's a question for you guys as well. Do you shoot to have a premium output like television, or do you shoot in the nature of being a podcaster? And what I mean by that is that I have my notes all over on the desk, and I think from a viewer's perspective, they know what they get themselves. They know what they let themselves in for when they see a podcast. They're not seeing something that's polished, like Good Morning Britain or whatever it could be, right? They're not seeing this. They want to see the real grit, uncut, what's going on, sign language, this, fingers, whatever it might be, right? Do you guys do you guys have a set way of how you want your videos to look, or do you guys sort of go?
I did.
You did, yeah.
I did, but I think that came from like the element of like my career and thinking like representing a brand. and shifting from representing a brand that isn't yours to representing yourself was a shift. And I approached it very much like owning the brand, and I actually found myself like, I don't know, like I when I started like going through a lot of the content, I found myself like realizing it doesn't have to be as polished as maybe I originally thought. And
I would say, as like a listener / viewer's perspective, I watch podcasts because I want to get a truly raw, unfiltered version of people. If you're watching a celebrity interview, you really want to know everything about them, and you want them to feel like they're opening up rather than a really structured, set out, like scripted episode.
Do you feel though that some of the mainstream broadcasters are maybe like not threatening but challenging the podcast industry with coming up with their own versions of podcasts that are completely polished, and you can tell they're scripted and they have a set way presenting like they would do?
I think so. I think that also comes with bigger numbers once you start getting an audience, because then it kind of goes back to what we were discussing before. Fear of trolls and fear of being cancelled, and then everything starts getting a bit more polished and put together, because there's that fear of what you can say, what you can't say, and what people you'll get scrutiny for, really.
And yeah, I imagine when the numbers get big, you're just more curated. And like you said, when you have a team, they focus on this works, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Your matcha on a table will work, but like no matcha would not work. I just imagine then you become another version of everyone else. I also imagine at some point you kind of lose a sense of you, and that's why people go on these like rediscovering journeys so much. We actually spoke about this on our first podcast, where you get into something so much that you just don't know who you are anymore, what your authentic self is, and then you rediscover it. So I suppose it's a journey.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, so we're up in time, but I'm going to ask one last question before we wrap up. So I'm very excited to see where all your podcasts go in the next coming years. And I also want to know, who would be your dream brand to work with, and why do you feel that they align with you and your podcast? Should we just go around in order?
Oh my god, you just asked.
That's crazy. Everyone.
Yeah. Where do I want to see it go in 1 year, yeah?
Yeah, sure. In a year's time.
To be honest with you, I would like to have the lineup I have in mind. Super exciting lineup. I just hope I get them on my podcast, and 50% of them are already there. And I would like to have, I'm breaking into seasons, so I would like to see that season gaining momentum over time, and then eventually to be a point of having it hosted on an OTT platform where it becomes more of more video based, less maybe audio based. Brand wise though, it's too many brands alive. I love a coffee brand. That's the purpose of Brew Bites. I love my coffee, has a bit of personality in there, but yeah, I'm going to keep that
fine
as a secret.
TBC, we'll go with that.
TBC, yeah.
Do you want to go first?
No, you can go first.
I mean, I don't really have a brand in mind since we're like super early stages, but I definitely have people in mind. They're really good at what they do. They're also podcasters, but they're a brand in itself. And you were speaking about branding earlier. I specifically really, really enjoy Grace Beverly and Mel Robbins, and I hope to get them on board someday and have a chat with them, because I feel like people always tell you to focus and have a niche and have one specific brand, but I don't have a niche, and I love doing multiple things, and that's what they do as well, and I just love there's someone who does it and makes me feel like it's possible. So having, just like Nadeem, I guess, just having a list of lineups rather than just brands, and whatever resonates. That's why our podcast would be like open to different industries, so we'll see what resonates with us.
Okay.
I've obviously now finishing off season 1. I honestly don't know when season 2 is coming. I don't know how I want to do it, if I want to do it, where I want to do it. Honestly, I learned so much from the first one and the type of people I interviewed that I didn't know if I would do it the same way if I do season 2. I think I'd keep the concept the same, but maybe I'd go for more founder-led rather than operators, because there's just so many things I found with it. So in terms of guests, I probably couldn't tell you. But in terms of a brand, just because I'm obsessed, I would probably say cloud. Like, I just use it every single day, and I feel like everything I do is very like B2B. So I feel like if I was to have a brand, that would be my dream.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Cool. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
And good luck.
What a great panel discussion. Thanks to our speakers for sharing their experience. It was really great to hear and learn how much work goes into the production of a podcast. Creating a podcast is not about chasing viral moments. It's about creating space where your audience feels seen and heard. At NBM, we have learned that podcasting works when it's personal, and this is what drives engagement. And that's what keeps listeners coming back. Up next, we have an exciting panel discussion about podcasts as a global media channel and why it belongs in every media plan. Let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to our panelists today. How are you both doing today?
Great. Excited to be with you.
Welcome. I'm glad you are both here, and we will do a little introduction as we get into it. We are here today because the Middle East is one of the fastest growing regions for podcast consumption. According to YouGov MENA, podcast listenership in the UAE and Saudi Arabia has been growing steadily, with 43% of UAE adults and 35% of Saudi Arabian adults listening to podcasts at least once a week. So today we're here to answer the question, how can brands effectively advertise to multilingual and international listeners through podcasts? So I want to welcome again my panelists today. We'll start with you. Could you please introduce yourself, tell us about your show, the language of your show, and some essential details?
Sure. So thank you again, Lindsay, for inviting me to be on this panel. My name is Alistair Budge. I am the host of a show called English Learning for Curious Minds, which is a show for people who are kind of intermediate to advanced English learners. And the philosophy behind the show is to help people learn English through learning weird and wonderful things about the world. I have been making this show since 2019, so almost 6 years. It does a kind of between two and 250,000 downloads a month, more like 300,000 if we're also including YouTube, and around kind of just around 5% of those are in the Middle East.
Excellent. Thank you, Alistair. I'm glad you've joined us today. And our second panelist is Matt Abrahams. Matt, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Very excited to be with you today. I am somebody who is passionate about communication, and I host a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart. We are a global podcast that focuses on communication, honing and develop communication skills, as well as careers. And we've been around for 5 years. We started in January 2020. We get about 1.5 million downloads a month, and about 4.5% of our listenership comes from the Middle East. We are really targeted to help people feel more comfortable and confident in their communication. So people come to us to learn communication skills as well as English language learning skills.
Excellent. Wonderful. And I will go ahead and just briefly introduce myself. My name is Lindsay McMahon. I am the co-host of the All Ears English podcast and the All Ears English Network. So All Ears English is a show teaching English as a second language to global professionals. Our network of 3 shows gets about 4.8 million downloads per month. And within Saudi Arabia, we do about 117,000 downloads per month. So very excited about expansion into the Middle East and reaching new audiences. So I just want to make sure that we define the term multilingual podcast. I think a lot of our listeners today are interested in advertising on a multilingual podcast. In my mind, there are a lot of ways we could define multilingual podcast, but in our situation, we are talking about a show that is hosted in one language. In our cases, it is English, and our audience that speaks English as a second or a third language, right? But it could be defined in different ways. So I just want to get that right out there on the table. And let's move into our first question today. So podcasting is expanding rapidly globally and within the Middle East. I want to ask you both, why is podcasting growing so fast? And are you seeing examples of listener behavior that is unique for your listeners compared to other channels? Alistair, why don't we start with you?
So it's a really interesting question. one reason that I think could help explain it is people kind of almost going mobile first in their kind of browsing experience, and so kind of skipping the desktop stage, and that kind of automatically drives you towards mobile first kind of learning experiences, and people kind of discovering podcasting as just this fantastic way to kind of improve yourself, keep learning new things on the go. And I think that's one of the key reasons, really. I'm sure that kind of mobile phone adoption shows similar kinds of growth in the region. So I think that's probably one of the primary reasons.
I love that. Matt, any thoughts on that and why podcasting is growing so fast globally?
I think podcasting is a reflection of a personal need that we have. You know, I teach at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and some of my colleagues actually study this, and it really has to do with connection. Podcasting is a very unique medium where you feel a strong connection, not just with the host and the content of the host, but with the community that develops around it. And as we become more global, more technologically connected, that intimacy, that connection that you can have is lacking, and people really crave it, and we'll see that happening. You can see very closely as technology like cell phones, as Alistair said, it gets adopted. Closely behind that comes these ways of connecting in a more personalized way. So I think part of it is technology for sure, but I think it's this need to feel connected, not just to a topic and a host, but to a community as well.
I love that. In my mind, nothing is more intimate than listening to a podcast episode. Viewing a video can never match that level of intimacy that we do have with our listeners, literally being in someone's ears, right? You are right there. They are going along through their day and you are in their day. I think this kind of podcasting has allowed our market to niche down significantly. Let's move into the second question here. Now, getting into the idea of purchasing ads from a multilingual podcast, I think one of the questions that an advertiser might have when we're having different languages going on is asking themselves, should I be running host-read ads or should we translate the ad into the local language? I'm wondering what you both think about that and what would be the pros or cons of translating the ad into the local language, maybe the native language of the listener with a voice actor versus using the power of the host or the influencer, maybe even if it's in a different language than the audience. Alistair, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. So I have quite strong thoughts on this, and also based on my personal experience as the podcaster and as a podcast listener, is that everything I've read and everything that I have done myself have suggested that host-read ads perform best, significantly better than non-host-read ads. And I think even when we're talking about multilingual podcasting, when English might not be the first language of the listener, they are still spending a kind of considerable time with you as a podcaster, listening to you in English. In my case, and I think in all three of our cases, we're all in English. And to switch into Arabic or any other language, unless it is a kind of natural segue where the host is talking about their experience living in Saudi Arabia or learning Arabic or something like that, I think sounds slightly unusual. So I would always suggest going with host-read for best performance.
Interesting.
In English.
Matt. Yeah, in English. Okay, so you believe host-read in English is the way to go to truly leverage the power of podcasting, right? Nice. Matt, any thoughts on that?
So I agree with Alistair. There's a connection that happens between the host and the audience. What I would add is a little bit of nuance. I think if you have a returning listener, somebody with whom you have built a strong connection, somebody who's listened for a while, perhaps a translated ad might not do as poorly, especially if the podcast curates the types of ads that it posts. So for example, we try very hard to make sure that the ads we run on our show are congruent and consistent with our messaging and our approach. And often they're things that I use personally. So to have somebody speak that in a language that people could clearly understand everything being said, that's the trade-off, obviously. If they know that we are a podcast that vets the ads that we run and that are consistent and congruent with what we're suggesting, then I think the penalty for not doing host read ads might be reduced. But certainly, given a choice, I would go with host read ads.
Yeah, the power of host read ads. Absolutely. One of the questions that I've had advertisers come to me in the last few years is the question, if we do a host read ad, will the audience understand the ad? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so are there things that you both do as part of your system to convey that? I mean, how do you work with the advertiser to let them know the language level of the listener? How do you address that question, Alistair?
So in my experience, and my show is really for people who are kind of intermediate to advanced, more towards the advanced level of English. And when I speak during the body of the show, I aim to speak clearly and not artificially slowly, but clearly, and making sure that it is relatively easy to understand. Not so much slower than I'm talking now. And when I am doing an ad, I am always making sure that I'm speaking a slightly more slowly, slightly more clearly, and making sure that, for example, if there is a promotional code or something, I'm spelling it out and making sure it's very easy to follow. So really, I don't do anything particularly extra when it comes to ads, but my show is for people who are relatively relatively far on in their English learning journey. I think for a more basic show, something that was aimed at people who are beginners at English, something like that, then we have to think slightly differently. Make sure that the ad is incredibly clear. Perhaps even there's a greater case for translating it. But in my case, it has never been so much of an issue. And really, I found in terms of the performance, I haven't had people saying, I've tried to sign up for this and it didn't work. I haven't had any issues with advertisers saying that the performance had not met expectations. People were always able to do what I asked them to do.
Yes. And I also think that, listeners have adapted to your voice, right? So even if maybe they struggle at the same pace with another host, another podcast they're not as used to, they have adapted their ears to your voice and would be able to understand your voice. Matt, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so similar to Alistair, we definitely make sure that that when I read host read ads, I'm talking slowly, enunciating clearly. That said, we do a couple other things. One, I make sure that in the ads, I work with the person purchasing the ads to see if there are ways we can build in examples to reinforce what we're saying. So obviously through repetition, it can help. And we test every one of our ads. We send it to people, some who are non-native speakers, some who might not know the particular product well, and get their feedback. So we work with the purchaser to try to make sure that everybody is happy that it's hitting the mark.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that idea, Matt, of testing out the ads. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that could help to ensure an advertiser that, yes, this is not going to be something to worry about. Take that extra step. Another extra step that can be taken is surveying the audience. So every year we try to survey our audience so we do understand their level. Now it's self-rating on their own level. However, it is an amount of data that we can provide to an advertiser to get that conversation going. But I think as podcasts, it's our responsibility to bring this up as a potential concern in the advertiser's mind so we can address it. When we do baked in ads, which we have been doing occasionally along with dynamically inserted ads, another strategy is to bring the ad into the context of what they're already used to hearing on the show. And you addressed this a little bit, Alistair, but one of the key things we do in All Ears English is our signature role plays. And we bring what they've learned, and sometimes we bring the actual ad content into a role play. And we've been playing around with this recently for a current advertiser we're working with. So it's already within the frame of what they're used to hearing. right? I think this could improve comprehension as well. So I'm glad that we've been able to address this. What are your thoughts on, just before we move on to the next topic, having kind of a all the way down the funnel approach of combining a series of host-read ads in addition to programmatically inserted ads in the native language to target for kind of a multidimensional approach?
I think that would be a wise idea to help the listeners understand. I don't think it's a bad thing. Now, if you're running them side by side, that might be a little jarring, but I can certainly see if you're doing pre-roll as host read and then mid-roll maybe in the native language, I don't think that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Alistair? Maybe in terms of a sequence across a number of months, maybe we start with a number of host-read ads and we follow up with ads in the native language to drive the conversion. That's an idea.
Yeah, I think that could definitely work. I mean, in my experience, the best performing campaigns have always been ones which have landed multiple times, because with podcasts, you might have people who are listening in every single day. You might have people who are tuning in once a week. Some people who are more occasional listeners, and so just by saying, right, I'm going to do this kind of 3-day blast, you'll probably be missing a relatively large proportion of the audience.
Yes.
So I think it's definitely smart to continue a campaign over a prolonged period. And if you want to test out different linguistic approaches, that can definitely be a sensible way to do it.
Yeah, I love it. So everyone on the panel here has been working within advertising for a number of months or years. And so we're all having varying experience, but I would love to hear some success stories. I think a big piece of success depends on getting a fit between the podcast and the brand. Do you have a success story you can share? And is there anything additional that you do to work with the brand to ensure their success? Matt, why don't you lead this one for us here?
Sure. So as I suggested, we really try to partner with companies that are congruent to what our mission is. So there is an international company called Grammarly. Grammarly is all about using AI to help people write. We're about communication skills. We've partnered with them, and we run copy that we mutually discuss together. I personally use their tool to help, so I can tell personal stories. I'll give another example as well. Because we also are a careers podcast, we've partnered with LinkedIn, again, very congruent. In this case, LinkedIn, and we have worked with LinkedIn to create content that is specific to their needs. So we are running special mini series where we talk about how people can communicate better during their job search journey. So it's not just running an ad. We've actually collaborated on content that is sponsored by them. So the closer and the better relating you can do with the sponsor really makes a difference. And we find high conversion rates, we find high listen through rates because of these partnerships and the time we've taken. So people really see that we trust in the brand and that they have worked hard to support us, which is important to the audience. The audience likes knowing that their podcast is being supported.
Yeah, I love that idea, Matt. The idea of working with a brand to design a campaign that may include host-read ads. It may include ads geo-targeted in the local
Yes.
language. It may include custom content. We've done a little bit of that as well. We worked a few years ago with a large athleisure brand, and part of our campaign was actually doing custom bonus interviews with famous exercise personalities and pulling in a conversation about exercise, about fitness, about that. And that also applies to our audience because any topic applies to learning English as a second language. So this idea of creating a campaign, not just running ads, I love it. I love it. Alistair, is there anything you want to add there?
Sure. So similar to what Matt said, I am pretty picky about which advertisers I choose to work with. And probably the most successful partnership I've had, which has been going on for several years, has been with an AI pronunciation app. So it kind of fits quite nicely into a kind of adjacent category in terms of if someone is listening to a podcast to improve their English, they probably want to improve their speaking, and they, especially if they're living in a English speaking country, they probably struggle to find people to practice their speaking with. Therefore, an app that allows them to practice speaking, get feedback on their pronunciation, is a sort of natural fit. And with the campaigns I did with this company, we would do them over multiple weeks. And the things that worked particularly well were having a kind of a set offer that someone would get. It was a more direct response type campaign. So there is this offer, this is when it ends, and there is a particular discount available with it. And like any kind of time limited offer, we would see a kind of trickle of people coming in, and then in the days leading up to the closure of the offer, kind of 80 or 90% of all sales would happen. So people were clearly listening and engaging with it. Also, to make that campaign more effective, we threw in kind of emails to our newsletter list and so on. So it was really a sort of integrated campaign across various different channels that we had.
It sounds like that's a theme that's kind of emerging here, is not just thinking in terms of I'm going to run 500,000 impressions with this brand. No, I'm going to develop a campaign and work with the brand to ensure their success and making sure that that brand is the right choice. For a while, I was working on doing a lot of CEO interviews with brands. So part of this idea would be, let's interview your CEO and let's talk about why you founded this brand, right? Because that starts with the leadership and the values of the brand, which I think can really inspire an audience if it's positioned in the right way as bonus content that they can learn something from. And I think we can learn something from everyone. Have you experimented with that angle at all, or any interest in that idea?
So I'll share that we actually are just about to run, starting in a month, a series of interviews in a mini series type way, where I talk to tech leaders and founders of communication tool companies. So we want to equip our audience to learn communication skills and to leverage tools that are relevant to them. And again, as you mentioned, it's a great way to partner. It's a great way to provide value to the listeners. And it's a great avenue to find new people interested in collaborating on the show. So we've talked to 6 tech company founders and leaders that can help our audience communicate better. And it's been a great pairing and really fun too.
I love it. It sounds like what we need to do is just go one step further, think a little bit more creatively, and we can create some amazing opportunities for these brands, especially as they're looking to advertise on multilingual shows. As we finish up our panel today, any final words of wisdom to someone, an ad buyer looking to work with podcasts like ours, multilingual shows? Alistair, any final words of wisdom?
I think I'd just like to kind of reinforce a theme that has been going throughout this panel, which is just really the intimacy that I think people who are listening to podcasts feel with their hosts. It's a very different relationship to almost anything else. And so an advert from a host is more like a kind of recommendation from someone that you have spent a lot of time with. Often that you've been spending much more time with than friends and colleagues, because you're listening to them for 20 minutes, half an hour every single day. And that kind of intimacy, I think, is pretty unique to podcasting. So when it comes to thinking about buying ads, really you need to be aware of the relationship that the host has with their listeners, the intimacy that comes from it. And also that it's not just a simple transaction. It's not a host saying, I will happily say this thing, because they are also protecting their relationship with their audience. Yes. So that's what I want to leave people with.
I love that. So important. Matt, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I would just echo what Alistair said, that it's a very unique opportunity because of the relationship audiences have with the host, with the podcast, and with each other, the community. And I would just echo the idea of being very creative because of that relationship, because people return consistently and they listen in a consistent way. There are opportunities to look at sponsorship and ads longitudinally, not just drop it in here, but you can look at it as a campaign that goes on for a while, because the relationship that we have with our audiences has been going on for a while. So I think it's, the difference between a long-term relationship and perhaps speed dating, right? And we are in the long-term relationship business.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, I want to thank you both. First of all, I want to congratulate you on the success of your shows and continued success moving on. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for joining our panel today. This has been wonderful. All right. So that wraps up our panel. And thank you and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot to Lindsay from All Ears English, Alistair and Matt. At NBM, we work with advertisers from across the globe, and it's clear you can't take a global message and drop it into a podcast. Localization is key, and you need to understand the culture, the context, and the content. That's where real opportunity lies.
To our speakers, partners, and attendees, thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Let's keep pushing boundaries, creating opportunities, and turning up the volume on great content. Keep listening, keep creating, and keep amplifying your voice.
Thank you all for joining us today. Whether you've been with us in person before in Dubai or Riyadh, or this is your first time tuning in virtually, we're so grateful that you made time to be part of this event. Today's sessions were a powerful reminder of how far podcasting has come in our region and just how much potential still lies ahead. From inspiring stories to tactical insights, one thing is clear. Audio is no longer the future, it's now.